welcome back. Difficult to cram everything into 30 minutes, but I'll have a go. Let me just talk a little bit about how we see the agency business, the advertising and marketing service business, being disruptive. It's a $1 trillion industry, so it sounds a lot, but in relation to things like the investment industry, it's relatively small.
Pay close attention, as what follows is a smattering of work by an organization that defies the commonplace, opting for something familiar and entirely new simultaneously.
Love to party, it's true. It will seem entirely improbable that everything you're about to see has been made by the same people.
Monks. Monks. There's no dot, silly.
Let me break this down for you.
What's in this box?
Well, this is
Glass Box Media.
Monks optimizes asset management and boosts media performance.
Transparency. Control. Automation.
finally. Let's move from hours to output.
They're orchestrating output.
Howdy, partner. Let's find your flow.
Tech transformation makes brand ambition real.
Oh boy.
Through speed, scale, and smart systems.
Do you believe in the power of connection?
I believe in real-time brands. Ideas that stimulate curiosity and action.
It's connection to the speed of culture.
It's expressive, emotional.
When I first started in this industry, it was all one-trick ponies.
Fame isn't going to sell.
While others make slides, Monks build solutions.
The future belongs to those who accelerate real industry transformation. Disruption protocol activated. We're going to a place where technology meets creativity.
It's advertising, baby.
Like I've never seen it before. Welcome to What's Next.
Oh, those monks.
So let me just talk a little bit about how we see the world. So we're a $1 billion business. We operate in 33 countries. We have one brand, one P&L, Monks. We help brands innovate globally, brands such as the ones you see listed there, and how they show up for consumers on the platforms. Just want to underline platform dominance for a minute. I mentioned a $1 trillion industry. If you look at that $1 trillion, it cuts into two industries, really, two subsectors. One, digital, which is growing about, as you know, about 10 or 15%, and the other, traditional, which is going back 10 or 15%, depending on whether you have live sport or not. You know, we're just watching in America the launch of the FIFA Club World Cup. Good example of the traction, to some extent, comes in for some criticism, but the traction that you see with live sport and soccer in America with the World Cup, with the Women's World Cup and the Olympic Games in 28 will get increasing momentum. So good examples of live sport. But the digital piece is dominated, in fact, the industry is dominated by the platforms. You have Google at 250 billion of ad spend out of that $1 trillion. You have Meta at 150. You have Amazon building its business. My view is Amazon will be a $100 billion business from an ad revenue point of view. Said that a few years ago, was much criticized for it, but already up at 60, so a 6% share of the total market, and TikTok 40 billion. If you take those four platforms, they account for 500 billion out of the $1 trillion, and 500 billion out of the 700 billion that's in digital. So just remember that as background as we go through this. And of course, as an agency, we've been extremely successful from an awards point of view, having been appointed Adweek's first and only so far AI Agency of the Year, and the One Show's AI Agency as well just recently. Now, what do we do? We're a brand partner with vision and expertise to reshape the world as we see it and show up and interact with that world. And we cover brand, we cover social, we cover experience, studio, platform, data, media, and technology services. So if you tried to piece it all together, we're focused on content, data and digital media, and last but not least, transformational services. Four fundamental principles: digital only, data-driven, which in an AI world, we started 6 years ago, in an AI world is becoming more increasingly relevant, obviously. Faster, better, cheaper. That's the line with which we go to the market. We debate the use of the word cheaper, but in a world that is changing, we'll touch on that later, we think efficiency and cost is increasingly important. Now, we're talking here in the UK, and we're just talking just before about what is the likely sort of pattern of the economy here. It's likely to get tougher, and efficiency, not just in the UK, but Europe as a whole, is going to be increasingly important. So faster, better, cheaper, more efficient, and lastly, a unitary brand, one brand. And what we're doing is supercharging what used to be called the Mag 7, now the MAGA 7 with Trump 2.0. We're supercharging the performance of those 7 big companies and changing how work gets done with AI and automation at scale. We cover 6 areas, really. First, around data, insights, and strategy. Second, around content, creative, and adaptation. Third, around media, delivery, and performance. And you'll see at the bottom of this slide the product portfolio that we developed around AI. We call it Monks Flow. I can't emphasize this enough. People think about it being very complicated. When I see presentations such as we've seen this morning, and if I was a client, I would find it extremely complicated. And I think that's reflected in the fact that we're seeing clients do tests, workshops, audits, rather than going all in. I'm going to show 1 or 2 clients that perhaps have taken a different approach and established a different point of view, but we've tried to develop different workflows. We've tried to streamline workflows in insights, the insight engine, in media planning and buying around clarity, around persona, which is a research tool, translate, which is translation and creative adaptation flow, also the flow of creation as well, asset planning, and performance flow. All of these are product suites that we use to try and simplify the workflow. And essentially what we're doing is changing the economics of your marketing as brands, as retailers, or as consumer goods companies with the use of AI. And trying to simplify as much as possible, where do we see the fundamental change? We see it in 5 areas, and all of these things are improving the effectiveness of your marketing and reducing the total cost of ownership of the agency process. I think the world, as we stand here and sit here, thank goodness we seem to have a little bit of a ceasefire, at least temporarily, in the Middle East, but we've got big issues around US-China, big issues around Russia and Ukraine, which, given what's been happening in the Middle East in the last 12 days, we tend to have put on the back burner. Still continuing problems around Iran. Add to that tariffs. You well know the implications of that. And we see 2 things coming out of that which are really important. One is that clients will choose geographies much more carefully for expansion than they did before. And so North and South America, the Middle East, and Asia, in our view, will become increasingly important. Africa is very volatile, probably micro rather than macro opportunity. Europe, in my view, and in our view, is going to be a battleground for efficiency. Every single client that I talk to looks at Europe, and what am I talking about when I Europe? Principally the UK, France, Germany, Italy, and Spain, the big 5, looks at it being a cost opportunity rather than the revenue opportunity. That's the background. 5 areas: visualization and copywriting, personalization at scale, media planning and buying, general client and agency and efficiency, and lastly, a little bit esoteric, but I think fundamentally important, democratizing knowledge. So with that as background, let me just go into a little bit of the detail that we see. Visualization and copywriting. We reduced product copy creation time by over a half by just really simplifying the workflow. The second area is an opportunity that we've seen around AI Hatch, the Hatch platform, and personalization at scale with Hatch. People in the automobile industry, you may know, are extremely picky about their launch commercials, usually done in exotic locations at high cost. We're talking multi-million dollars and taking months. This literally took 12 days, and again, for a couple of $100,000. And what impressed the clients enormously is use of shadow reflection, which, as I say, they're extremely picky about. So the technological quality is increasing and improving all the time. And I want to show you now a film from a company called Runway. This is a Chinese equivalent. This is the US company that I mentioned before, just showing you their technology in brief, and then I'll come on and show you a Chinese company called Minimax doing virtually the same. So can we run the Runway? Again, all the shots there are agentic. All of them are automated. None of them come from filming in the normal way. And let me just show you now the Chinese equivalent of this. This is, for any of you with young daughters in particular, will know the phenomenon in China called, well, not just China, but internationally called Labubu. Run by a Chinese retail company, now theme parks in Beijing and others. So let me just run the commercial from Minimax. So start to think about the implications of this: sportswear, automobiles, retail, kids' toys, whatever. Just think about the implications of that for visualization and copywriting. And the second area, which is critically important, is personalization at scale. And with Monks Flow, I mean, this is an example of Forever 21 from the retail area, where we've improved return on investment using personalization at scale to generate higher ROI of about 2/3 and better CTR of just over 70%. These are examples of personalization at scale, and I'll come back to that certainly in a minute. The personalization at scale is really the Netflix model on steroids, I'll put it like that. For a series like Squid Games or Narcos, we would traditionally produce in theory, about 1.5 million assets for each campaign, personalized at scale, using first-party data and the signals from the platforms. So first, collection of first-party data is absolutely critical. Relationship with the platforms is critical too. With AI, we can do this at multiples of that. So we were producing multi-million amounts of assets at scale, highly personalized. That means for the agency business, by the way, that we are collapsing the time period needed to produce this work. Traditionally, we've charged clients or negotiated with clients on the basis of time. That model has to go, or at least be modified. So for example, with General Motors, we have a retainer relationship, we have an FTE relationship, but we also have an asset use relationship. So the more assets we use at scale, the greater the revenue for us and the greater the return for the client. The third area is media planning and buying. We've got an example here from Headspace. Essentially, what we're doing, I mentioned the industry was $1 trillion. There are about 250,000 people employed in the media planning and buying industry, in the holdcos, in independent agencies such as ourselves. That will not be the case in the future, in our view. What will increasingly happen is that the allocation of that spending is determined by algorithms. Very similar, I mentioned the equity industry or the investment industry. A Blackstone or a BlackRock will manage on their own something like $13 trillion of expenditure and allocate it to equity, to real estate, to property. The guy I used to work with at Great Group M, Owen Gottlieb, used to call media planning media investment management, and he was dead right. Everything we do for clients in planning and buying rests on investing that money, that part of that $1 trillion, in the most effective way. My view, our view, is that within 3 years, a lot of those media planners and buying activity, that activity, will be replaced by algorithms, and the relationship that clients have to have and we have to have is to get closer to the platforms such as Amazon and work much more closely as validators to the results that the algorithms throw out. Just to give you another example of what's happening in the media planning and buying industry, I mentioned persona flow. That is a real-time workflow with consumers to determine what is the best audience and targeting, to optimize content and messaging, and to accelerate market research. It could be for products, it could be for services, it could be the impact of new launches, but doing it in real time. We haven't got time for a demonstration, but we can do that afterwards to take you through it. The two other areas that I want to just touch on briefly are, firstly, client and agency efficiency. And let me just give you one example of our work with AWS and NVIDIA and Adobe on improving the effectiveness and efficiency of outside broadcasting. So usually an outside broadcaster would buy a truck for about $10 million, amortize it over 5 years, so you've got a $2 million a year cost. With NVIDIA, within AWS and Adobe, and using their technologies together, we can reduce that cost to about $100,000, $200,000 using remote broadcasting, using AI and cloud. So it's just an example of the huge efficiencies that are taking place within the industry. The other thing I want to mention is this. We had a meeting last week at Cannes with Canva. Canva is really interesting because it specializes, works very closely with Amazon. It specializes in small and medium-sized enterprise, not so much the larger enterprises, but is starting to build a capability with larger enterprises too. I think this is a really interesting area because what clients want on the software side is more flexibility, more agility, and what I would describe as more pricing flexibility about what elements of software they take. And we'll be working very closely with Canva, not just in the small and medium-sized enterprise category, but also large enterprises, to see what can be done to improve agility, flexibility, and indeed pricing. And the final area, which you may find a little bit esoteric, but really I think this is the fundamentally important area, and that's democratization of knowledge. And I've put up NVIDIA's logo as an example. There would be other companies as well that would be highly relevant, but Jensen Huang has 51 direct reports. And if you or anybody in this room, I know we've had a speaker from McKinsey, if you went to McKinsey and said, what is the fundamental or appropriate management span, direct reporting span, they would say 12 or 13 people, probably at BCG and Bain and others too. That is being turned upside down. How is it that Jensen Huang manages to have 51 direct reports? And the reason is he manages the workflow and flow of information underneath him very efficiently using LLMs that disperse knowledge horizontally across the organization. So the organization is being flattened through the use of AI and agentic knowledge. For example, we have, say, 700, 800, or 900 people working on our key clients. around the world. If we can, for example, with Amazon, we can dispense or transmit to them this conference and the results of this conference and the conclusions from it agentically, using AI, can be extremely effective. And that's what Jensen Huang has done in the context of the organization NVIDIA. He doesn't do one-to-one meetings, or not many. He sets KPIs for his direct reports, those 51 people, and monitors them through the year. What it's doing is flattening the organization. And the other thing that it's doing, which I think is fundamentally important, is reducing the politics, with a small p, that take place in all organizations, whether they be client or agencies. Now, I haven't written a book on the industry, and I have no intention of doing it. But I think if I was to do that, the biggest issue that faces clients and faces agencies is people inside the organization contradicting the purpose and strategy of the company. Aligning people across the organization is the fundamentally important thing. Good people are good. Good people who share are the real jewels. And what's happening with AI is it's, in a way, forcing people to share, and they cannot control silos by controlling information. So it's really flattening out the organization in an extremely effective way. And lastly, let me just show you a film from Humane and Luma. So Humane is a Saudi startup. When I say startup, it's not really a startup. It's the consolidation in Saudi Arabia of all their AI companies that really come out of Aramco, the oil company, which, as you remember, was IPO'd, I think, originally at around $4 trillion. So it was, in market cap, at one stage, the largest company in the world, bigger than Germany if you equate market cap to GDP. So a huge company with huge resources. What they've done is consolidate their AI resources into Humane. We launched it for them when President Trump visited the Middle East recently. They have now linked up with an AI company called Luma, run by an Indian PhD, educated at Columbia University in America, worked at Apple, launched his own company. I think he's garnered funding of just under $1 billion with a market valuation in excess of that. And I'm running this because we launched it last week, but it is really now, I think, reflecting probably the most advanced technology. It's also establishing the Middle East and Saudi, and of course the UAE also doing this with G42, as a center, a third center for AI. So you have US, you have China, and the third force will be these Middle Eastern companies, particularly around Humane. So can we just run the last video on Humane? And there's a little tag at the end that reflects what we did in Cannes.
Your imagination, your story without limits. Introducing Humane Create, Humane and Luma. Multimodal, dynamic, and intelligent by design. Ray 2 unlocks a new frontier in 3D motion graphics. Turn your concepts into story-driven games with unparalleled ease. Reimagine and transform environments. Shape individual moments with precision and control. Mood boards, concepts, campaigns, all in your hands. What once took teams, time, and budget can now be crafted in moments. From action-packed first-person games to immersive open-world adventures, this is for everyone. All ages, all places. You can do it yourself. Humane Luma. And you. Multimodal AI for the next era of gaming and entertainment. The end of limits.
What's next?
Financial Times House, 2:40 p.m. Be there. Sir Martin, Humane, Luma. Enough said. No FOMO.
So we did a little launch of the company with the FT. I've got 2 minutes left, and let me just to underline one thing. Most of the clients we deal with are tinkering with AI. I think the biggest block on AI, and I didn't get the opportunity because we had an appointment to hear the panel from VCs, but I think the biggest issue is not about technology. I think everybody understands the importance of technology. The biggest issue is the human element, the resistance that we see in organizations at senior level, mid-level, and whatever level to change. And it's natural. Let me just give you an example from the retail industry. I met many years ago Hubert Joly, who took over Best Buy when it was a very traditional retailer. This is many years ago, based, I think it was in Minneapolis, in Minnesota. He took it over as CEO, and he went into the company, and he was continually said, you know, this is about change management. And he spent the first 6 months trying to digitize the company and encountered a lot of resistance. And after 6 months, he said, I realized it was about change management, so I changed the management. And I think, whilst it was of a different era and about a different thing, that is fundamentally the problem. So we take the strategic idea and we implement it, we create, we produce, and distribute the assets at scale. Those highly personalized assets using first-party data and the signals from the platforms. It's a totally different model. Why was it that he was able to do that? And obviously, the process is not finished yet fully, but why did he take that bet? I think he's really interesting from the point of view of a CMO who really is analytical. What he wants to do is to find the best marketing analytical solution to GM. And the GM issue is really an interesting issue. It's the issue of the auto category and financial services. What is the issue? Low price competition coming in with good technology. The Chinese EVs and AVs can produce, you know, BYD can produce an AV car with God's eye, which is the technology, for $10,000 pre-tariffs. Let's say it's $13,000 or $14,000 or $15,000 with tariffs. Last week or 2 weeks ago, they introduced an EV for $25,000. There is no way that GM or anybody else for that matter, BMW, Mercedes, can produce EVs at that level. They know, Norm knows at GM, that at some point in time, Mary Barra, the CEO, is going to say to him, you have to reduce your media costs in order for us to compete, because we have to lower our costs to compete with the Chinese EVs and AVs. What he's doing is reducing his create costs. He's trying to do it as effectively using the technology and efficiently as he possibly can do as early as possible. Same thing in financial services. We work for Nubank in Brazil. Nubank is a technologically flexible platform. Everybody knows how difficult it is to open a bank account or change a bank account. There's an inertia inside that business that has to be overcome from a consumer point of view. A company like Nubank is doing it and attacking the fundamental profitability of the branch banks like Santander and others. So really interesting shifts are taking place in those two verticals, automobiles and in financial services, that we see having huge ramifications. I'm 2 minutes over time, but I wanted to get that sermon out because I do think at the end of the day, it's not about the technology. You can see the technology advancing at light speed. So goodness knows what the next 3 or 4 months or 3 or 4 years are going to do. So it's not about technology. It's about the willingness of human beings to change and embrace change. Thanks very much.